What if the man you married, the charming millionaire who swept you off your feet, was a complete stranger? For Isabella, a quiet life as a waitress was a distant memory. She was Mrs. Thorne, wife to the tech mogul Marcus Thorne, living a life most only dream of. But one devastating night in front of his powerful friends, Marcus shattered her world with 7 apathetic words. "She's the surrogate, not my wife." Humiliated and heartbroken, she fled to their palatial home, only to find not comfort, but a sharp-suited lawyer waiting in the shadows. The nightmare she would soon discover had only just begun. The restaurant Aurelia was a symphony of quiet wealth. Crystal glasses chimed like distant bells, and the air hummed with the low murmur of powerful people making powerful deals. It was the kind of place where Isabella once served tables, her feet aching and her smile plastered on for a decent tip. Tonight, she was supposed to be a guest. She was Isabella Thorne, wife of Marcus Thorne, the billionaire founder of Thorne Dynamics. At least that's what she thought she was. She paused at the maitre d's station, the silk of her emerald green dress feeling alien against her skin. It was a dress Marcus had picked out just as he'd picked out everything else in her life for the past year. The car, the house, the friends, all curated by Marcus. "I'm here to meet my husband, Marcus Thorne," she said, her voice softer than she intended. The maitre d', a man named Jean-Pierre, whose face was a mask of professional politeness, didn't even glance at his reservation list. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite read. Pity, perhaps. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne. Mr. Thorne's party is in the private dining room. This way." He led her through the main dining area where heads turned. She saw the familiar mix of curiosity and envy in their gazes. They saw the fairy tale, the unassuming young woman who had captured the heart of one of the city's most eligible and ruthless bachelors. They didn't see the gilded bars of the cage. Marcus had told her to stay home tonight. He'd called it a boring, high-stakes business dinner and kissed her forehead with a detached affection that had become his trademark. "I'll be home late, darling. Don't wait up." But a wave of loneliness so profound it felt like drowning had washed over her in the silent, cavernous mansion she was supposed to call home. She missed him. Or rather, she missed the man he had been in the beginning, the one who would look at her like she was the only person in the world, the one who made her believe in second chances. She had hoped to surprise him, to slide into the seat beside him and remind him that she was more than just a beautiful object to be kept at home. Jean-Pierre stopped before a set of ornate mahogany doors. "They are just through here, madam." She took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and pushed the door open. The sound that greeted her wasn't the drone of business talk, but a roar of masculine laughter. Marcus was at the head of a long table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his face flushed with success. He was holding court surrounded by a group of investors, their faces slick with admiration. And then she saw her. A woman seated to Marcus's right in the seat that should have been Isabella's. She was blonde, impeccably dressed, and leaned into Marcus with an air of easy intimacy that made Isabella's stomach clench. Marcus's eyes found Isabella standing in the doorway. The laughter died in his throat. His charming smile didn't just fade. It was wiped away, replaced by a mask of cold fury. The air in the room crackled with tension. "Isabella," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay home." The investors swiveled in their chairs to look at her, their expressions ranging from confusion to amusement. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. Her face burned with humiliation. I just wanted to see you," she stammered, her grand romantic gesture shriveling into a pathetic plea. One of the investors, a portly man with a booming voice named Richard Sterling, chuckled. "Well, Marcus, you didn't tell us you were bringing 2 beautiful dates tonight. Aren't you going to introduce us to your lovely wife?" Isabella's heart gave a hopeful flutter. Here it was, the moment Marcus would put his arm around her, laugh it off, and claim his wife. Marcus looked from the investor to the blonde woman and then to Isabella. A cruel, calculating smirk played on his lips. He stood up, but he didn't walk toward her. He placed a possessive hand on the blonde woman's shoulder. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice ringing with a chilling clarity that cut through the room. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. This," he said, gesturing to the blonde, "is my fiancée, Catherine Davenport." He then turned his gaze cold and sharp as a shard of ice directly onto Isabella. He looked at her not with anger but with complete and utter indifference, as if she were a piece of furniture he was tired of. "Her," Marcus said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't be mistaken. She's the surrogate, not my wife." The words hit Isabella with the force of a physical blow. The surrogate. The room erupted in shocked whispers. The men at the table exchanged knowing, predatory glances. The blonde Catherine looked at Isabella with a triumphant, venomous smile. Isabella stood frozen, the blood draining from her face. Every fairy tale, every promise, every tender moment she thought they'd shared evaporated in the acid of those 7 words. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't his partner. She was a vessel, a service provider, an object he had acquired to perform a function. Tears blurred her vision. She couldn't breathe. She saw the pity in Jean-Pierre's eyes now for what it was. He knew. Everyone knew. The entire world, it seemed, knew her place in Marcus Thorne's life, except for her. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. With a strangled sob, she turned and fled. She ran through the restaurant, past the staring faces and the pointing fingers, her borrowed silk dress feeling like a costume for a fool. She burst out into the cool night air, gasping for breath, the laughter from the private room echoing in her ears. The valet brought her car, a sleek black Mercedes she'd never felt was her own, and she got in her hands, shaking too badly to put the key in the ignition. The drive back to the mansion in the Hollywood Hills was a blur of tears and shattered illusions. The sprawling house, usually a symbol of her unbelievable new life, now felt like a prison. Each twist and turn of the winding road seemed to mock her, leading her back to the source of her pain. She finally pulled through the imposing iron gates, the tires crunching on the pristine gravel driveway. The house was lit up, every window glowing like a malevolent eye. She had expected it to be empty. She had expected to be able to shatter a vase, scream into a pillow, and fall apart in private. But as she stumbled through the massive front door, her mascara-streaked face illuminated by the grand chandelier in the foyer, she saw that she was not alone. A woman was standing by the sweeping staircase, her silhouette sharp and imposing against the soft lighting. She was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a leather briefcase in one hand. Her expression was calm, intelligent, and completely unreadable. Isabella's first thought was that this was another one of Marcus's cronies, someone from his company sent to manage the situation. Who are you?" Isabella asked, her voice raspy from crying. The woman took a step forward, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She didn't offer a comforting smile or a word of sympathy. Her gaze was direct, almost unnervingly so. "My name is Evelyn Reed," the woman said, her voice crisp and professional. "I'm a lawyer." Isabella's heart sank. Of course. Marcus was efficient. He hadn't even waited until morning. He'd humiliated her, and now he'd sent his lawyer to throw her out and finalize the disposal. "Marcus sent you." Isabella said, the words tasting like ash. "He sent you to get rid of me." A flicker of something, not pity but perhaps understanding, crossed the lawyer's face. "Mr. Thorne did not send me," she corrected calmly. Isabella stared, confused. "Then, why are you here?" Evelyn Reed took another step closer, her eyes locking onto Isabella's. "You sent for me," she said. "Or rather, you are about to. I'm not his lawyer, Ms. Rozzi. I'm yours." The name Ms. Rozzi hit Isabella harder than the lawyer's presence. Not Mrs. Thorne. Ms. Rozzi. It was a stark, legalistic stripping away of the identity she had inhabited for the past 12 months. She felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the marble floor beneath her feet was tilting. "My lawyer," Isabella whispered, the words foreign in her mouth. I don't have a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. That has been taken care of. Evelyn Reed stated her tone, leaving no room for argument. She gestured toward the formal living room, a vast, soulless space decorated in shades of white and gray that Isabella had always hated. Shall we sit? I imagine you have questions, and I have a great deal to explain. Numbly, Isabella followed her into the room and sank into a plush white armchair that felt as cold and unyielding as its owner. Evelyn Reed did not sit. She walked to the large, unlit fireplace and placed her briefcase on the mantelpiece with a soft click. I'll be direct, Ms. Rossi. The lawyer began, turning to face her. You are in a great deal of trouble, but you are not without resources. You were smarter than you gave yourself credit for. Smarter? I feel like the biggest fool in the world. Isabella choked out a fresh wave of tears, threatening. 6 months ago. Evelyn continued, ignoring the outburst. You walked into my office, Reed and Associates. You were nervous. You told me you were about to marry Marcus Thorne and that he had presented you with a prenuptial agreement. You said something felt off. Isabella's mind reeled. She remembered that day. She'd been so in love, so swept up in the whirlwind. Marcus had presented the thick document with a casual wave of his hand. Just a formality, darling. My lawyers insist on it. Protects my company. He had made her feel cheap for even hesitating. But a tiny, persistent voice in the back of her mind, the voice of the waitress who had seen too much of the world's ugliness, had whispered a warning. On a whim, she had looked up top family law attorneys, and the name Evelyn Reed had appeared. She had snuck out of the mansion, taken a cab to a sleek downtown high-rise, and sat in that very office feeling like an imposter. I remember, Isabella said softly. You told me it was the most predatory agreement you had ever seen. I did, Evelyn confirmed. It was designed to strip you of everything. In the event of a divorce, you would walk away with nothing. No assets, no alimony. There was even a clause waiving your right to ever speak publicly about your relationship with him. I signed it anyway, Isabella murmured, shame washing over her. He told me it was a test, to see if I loved him for him, not his money. He said if I trusted him, he would tear it up after the wedding. He was so convincing. Evelyn's expression remained impassive, but her eyes held a glint of something that looked like grim satisfaction. You signed it. But you also did something else. You followed my advice. You set up a secondary private account at a different bank. You made photocopies of every document he ever gave you. And you retained my services, paying a modest retainer from the personal allowance he gave you with a contingency agreement for the future. Isabella had forgotten. In the rosy glow of her new marriage, those clandestine precautions had felt silly, paranoid. She had wanted to believe in the fairy tale. Now they were the only thing keeping her from sinking completely. But what does any of that matter? Isabella cried, the dam of her composure breaking. He didn't divorce me, Ms. Reed. He stood up in front of a dozen people and said I was never his wife. He said I was a surrogate. Evelyn Reed walked over to her briefcase and opened it. She pulled out a thick-bound document. It was a copy of the prenuptial agreement. She flipped to a specific page tabbed with a small red sticker. This is where it gets complicated, Evelyn said, her voice dropping slightly. Marcus Thorne is a meticulous, diabolical man. He didn't just lie to you verbally. He built the lie into the very legal framework of your relationship. That prenup you signed, it wasn't a prenup. She handed the document to Isabella. Isabella stared at the title on the cover page, words she had glossed over in her love-struck haze. Gestational Surrogacy and Non-Disclosure Agreement. The air left Isabella's lungs. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a mistake. The words were there in stark black ink. She frantically flipped through the pages. The language was dense, impenetrable legalese, but the key phrases now jumped out at her. Intended parent Marcus Thorne. Gestational carrier Isabella Rossi. Compensation. Parental rights. termination of agreement upon successful birth. Her marriage certificate. The ceremony in the Bahamas with only 2 of his paid employees as witnesses. The photographs. It was all a sham. A meticulously constructed stage play designed to legitimize a surrogacy arrangement. He never married me. She breathed, the horror of it dawning in its full monstrous scope. The whole thing, the entire year, it was a lie. A lie and a legally binding contract, Evelyn clarified. He created a narrative of a whirlwind romance and marriage to provide a stable and loving environment for the conception and birth of his heir. It was designed to circumvent the scrutiny and legal hurdles of a traditional surrogacy, especially if he wanted to maintain sole custody with no questions asked. He likely told his inner circle the truth that you were a paid carrier while presenting a different face to the world. Isabella felt a wave of nausea. She thought back to their conversations about children. Marcus had been so eager. He'd said he wanted a family and heir to carry on his legacy. He'd made it sound so romantic, the ultimate expression of their love. Now she saw it for what it was, a business transaction. He wasn't looking for a wife, he was incubator shopping. Why? Isabella asked, her voice trembling. Why go to all this trouble? Why the public humiliation tonight? Leverage, Evelyn answered instantly. The contract stipulates that upon the birth of a healthy child, you are to be paid a one-time fee of $500,000 and are to relinquish all parental rights. However, it also contains a morality clause. Clause 12b. It states that any action on your part that brings scandal, disrepute, or unwanted public attention to the intended parent is grounds for immediate termination of the contract without pay. Isabella looked up, the pieces clicking into place with sickening precision. Tonight, she began, was a setup, Evelyn finished for her. He knew you were feeling lonely and neglected. He likely suspected you would show up. By publicly shaming you and branding you a surrogate, he provokes you. He expects you to get hysterical, to go to the press, to cause a scandal. The moment you do, you violate Clause 12b. He gets his baby, you get branded as an unstable gold digger, and he doesn't have to pay you a single cent. He walks away clean, a tragic victim of a deceptive woman, while his fiancée, Catherine Davenport, steps in as the loving mother. Isabella stared at the lawyer, her mind a whirlwind of betrayal and fury. Marcus hadn't just broken her heart. He had tried to utterly annihilate her, to erase her from his life with surgical legal precision, leaving her with nothing but shame and trauma. And the baby? Isabella asked, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. She was 6 weeks pregnant. A fact only she and her doctor knew. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to tell Marcus to give him the gift she thought he wanted more than anything. Evelyn's face softened for the first time, a flicker of genuine empathy in her eyes. According to this document, the child is his property, his and his alone. A fire ignited in Isabella's chest, a rage so pure and hot it burned away the tears. It was one thing to discard her. It was another thing to steal her child. This wasn't just a contract anymore. This was war. He's not getting away with this, Isabella said, her voice low and hard, all traces of the timid waitress gone. He's not taking my baby. Evelyn Reed allowed herself a small, thin smile. I was hoping you'd say that, she said. He thinks he's in control. He thinks he's already won. He has no idea who he's dealing with. Who is he dealing with? Isabella asked. He's dealing with you, Ms. Rozzi, Evelyn replied, her eyes glinting. And he's dealing with me. Now let's talk about how we're going to dismantle Marcus Thorne's empire piece by piece. The next few days were a masterclass in controlled warfare orchestrated by Evelyn Reed. The sprawling mansion, once Isabella's prison, was transformed into a command center. Evelyn moved into one of the guest suites, her presence a constant calming source of strength. She instructed Isabella to act broken. He's monitoring you, Evelyn explained, pointing to a tiny, almost invisible lens in the corner of the ceiling. Your phone, the house systems, your car's GPS. He expects you to be hysterical, to make a mistake, so we give him what he wants to see. And so Isabella played the part. She wept. She stayed in her room ordering trays of food she barely touched. She made one frantic, tearful call to her sister, which she knew Marcus would have transcribed within the hour. She was the picture of a woman defeated. But behind the closed door of her bedroom, a different Isabella was emerging. Fueled by Evelyn's guidance, her grief was crystallizing into cold, hard resolve. They communicated using burner phones Evelyn had provided, and in the dead of night they would meet in the wine cellar, the one place in the house Evelyn's security expert had deemed free of surveillance. "The contract is formidable," Evelyn said during one of their subterranean meetings, spreading copies of the documents across an old wine barrel. "It was drafted by the best lawyers money can buy. A frontal assault in court would be bloody expensive and public exactly what he wants. We need leverage. A weakness he hasn't accounted for." "What kind of weakness?" Isabella asked. "Every powerful man has a secret, Ms. Rossi. Usually it involves money or another woman. In Marcus's case, we know about the other woman, Catherine Davenport. Her family owns a massive media conglomerate, which explains the fiancé play a strategic alliance. But that's not enough. We need something he can't spin, something he can't buy his way out of." Evelyn tapped a section of the agreement. "This entire contract is predicated on one thing: his desire for a biological heir. He's obsessed with legacy, with continuing the Thorne name. His own father built the initial fortune, and Marcus has always felt the pressure to live up to it. His entire identity is tied to this idea of a dynasty. If we can find a crack in that foundation, the whole structure will crumble." The opportunity came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the incident at Aurelia, a plain manila envelope appeared, slipped under the front door. There was no note, no return address. Inside was a single keycard and a handwritten message on a slip of paper. "He keeps a second set of books. His old office. B.C. B.C. Isabella wondered aloud. Evelyn's eyes lit up with recognition. "Benjamin Carter," she breathed. He was Marcus's CFO for almost a decade. He was fired 6 months ago, right before you got married. Marcus claimed Carter was incompetent, but the rumor on Wall Street was that Carter had grown a conscience. The key card was for the old headquarters of Thorne Dynamics, a building they had vacated a year ago for a newer, shinier skyscraper. According to public records, the building was slated for demolition, but the process had been stalled. "It's a trap," Isabella said immediately. "Marcus put him up to this." "Maybe," Evelyn conceded. "Or maybe Mr. Carter has been waiting for an opportunity for revenge. A disgruntled CFO is the best friend a lawyer could ask for. It's a risk, but it's a risk we need to take." That night, Isabella, dressed in black jeans and a hoodie, her hair tucked under a baseball cap, felt a tremor of fear that was quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Evelyn drove her to the deserted downtown district, parking a block away from the old glass and steel tower. "The security systems are offline, but there may be a private guard," Evelyn warned, handing her a small earpiece. "I'll be your eyes and ears. Get in, find the office, find the books, and get out. Do not linger." Isabella slipped out of the car and into the shadows. The street was silent. A ghost town of abandoned office buildings. The keycard worked the lock on the service entrance, clicking open with an unnervingly loud sound. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with the smell of dust and decay. Emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows down the empty corridors. It was terrifying. But the thought of Marcus's smug face, of the word surrogate, pushed her forward. She found the old executive wing on the top floor. The name Marcus Thorne was still faintly visible on the frosted glass of the corner office. The door was locked. She was about to turn back when she remembered something Marcus had told her once, bragging about his own cleverness. "Sentiment is a weakness, but it's also the best hiding place. No one ever looks in the heart." On the wall opposite the office was a large framed abstract painting, a gift from his late mother. Isabella ran her hands along the frame. Her fingers found a small, almost invisible indentation. She pressed it. A section of the wall beside the painting clicked open, revealing a hidden keypad. "I'm in," she whispered into her earpiece. "There's a keypad." "He's arrogant. Try his birthday." Evelyn's voice crackled back. Isabella typed in the 8 digits. The keypad flashed green and the door to his office swung open. The office was draped in white sheets like a tomb. In the center of the room was his old desk, a massive block of mahogany. She tried the drawers, locked. She was about to pry them open when she remembered the second part of his boast, "No one ever looks in the heart." She looked at the desk. It was ornate with intricate carvings on the front. In the center was a carved crest of the Thorn family. In the heart of the crest, she found a tiny keyhole. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning for a key. Nothing. "I can't find a key," she whispered, her heart pounding. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind her. Isabella froze, her blood turning to ice. She wasn't alone. A man stepped out from behind a sheet-draped bookshelf. He was in his late 50s with tired eyes, a rumpled suit, and a look of profound sadness. He held up his hands to show he was unarmed. "I was hoping you'd figure that out," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. He was always so theatrical. "Benjamin Carter," Isabella breathed. The man nodded. "Call me Ben. I thought it was time someone leveled the playing field." He walked over to the desk, pulled a small ornate key from his own pocket, and inserted it into the crest. He opened a hidden compartment, revealing not a ledger but a single slim laptop. "He's too smart for paper trails," Ben explained, opening the laptop. It booted up to a password screen. "This is the real brain of Thorn Dynamics. The offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the deals made in back rooms. But that's not the important part." He typed in a complex password. The screen opened to a file directory. He clicked on a folder labeled Legacy. "Marcus has a secret," Ben said, his voice dropping. "A big one. It's the reason he fired me. I found out and I refused to be a part of it." He opened a file. It was a medical document, a series of lab reports from a private offshore clinic. Isabella leaned in, her eyes scanning the technical jargon, and then she saw it. A diagnosis stated in clear, unequivocal terms. Patient Marcus R. Thorn. Diagnosis azoospermia. Prognosis sterile. Isabella stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process the information. Sterile. Marcus Thorn, the man obsessed with his bloodline, with creating a biological heir, could not have children. "I don't understand," she said, looking at Ben. "If he can't have children, then this whole thing, the surrogacy, is a lie built on top of a lie," Ben finished. "He's not just deceiving you, my dear, he's deceiving everyone. His investors, his new fiancé's family, the world. He can't produce an heir, so he decided to acquire one." He clicked on another file. It was a profile complete with photos and a detailed genetic background. The man was a Danish architect, tall, blonde, and intelligent. An anonymous donor from a highly exclusive European sperm bank. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The cruelty, the manipulation, it all made a terrible kind of sense. Marcus didn't just want a baby. He wanted a specific kind of baby. One that could pass as his. He had chosen Isabella for her looks, her health, her intelligence, a perfect vessel to carry a child conceived from a carefully selected donor. The baby she was carrying wasn't just not his. He had ensured it would look like it could be. "He was never going to let you have any part of this," Ben said gently. "His plan was to use you, take the baby, pay you off, or discredit you, and then raise the child as his own true-blooded son with his new powerful wife. No one would ever know the truth." Isabella felt a cold fury unlike anything she had ever known. She had been chosen like livestock. Her body was a factory, and the baby, her baby, was a product to be delivered. "Thank you, Ben," she said, her voice steady and clear. She looked up from the laptop, her eyes meeting his in the dusty darkness. "You've just given us the key to everything." Ben nodded, a grim smile on his face. He ruined my life because I wouldn't go along with his lies. It's time he faced the truth. Make him pay, Ms. Rozzi, for both of us. Armed with the digital bombshell from Ben Carter's laptop, Isabella felt a surge of power. The fear was gone, replaced by a diamond-hard certainty. She and Evelyn now had the ultimate leverage proof that Marcus Thorne's entire dynastic ambition was a meticulously constructed fraud. This changes the game completely, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming as she analyzed the files on the encrypted drive Ben had given them. They were back in the wine cellar, the air thick with the scent of aged oak and revolution. His deal with the Davenport family, the media moguls, it's almost certainly contingent on him providing an heir for their shared empire. Catherine Davenport isn't marrying Marcus Thorne the man, she's marrying Marcus Thorne, the future father of her children. If it gets out that he's sterile, the Davenports will drop him so fast it will create a sonic boom. So we release it, Isabella said, eager for the kill. We send it to the press. No, Evelyn countered, holding up a hand. Not yet. A public reveal is our final nuclear option. If we release it now, he'll use the Davenport media machine to paint you as a liar, the documents as forgeries. He'll bury us in lawsuits and injunctions. We have the warhead, but we're not launching it. Not until the target is perfectly aligned. Their strategy shifted from defense to offense. The first move was subtle. Evelyn, using a third-party solicitor to mask her involvement, filed a simple petition for dissolution of marriage in family court on behalf of an anonymous Jane Doe against an anonymous John Doe. It was a standard boring filing, but she made sure to include a few key, albeit vague, details: a high net worth individual, disputed premarital agreement, and issues of paternity. It was a ghost, a whisper in the legal system, but it was enough to be noticed by Marcus's legal team, who monitored all such filings as a matter of course. It was a shot across his bow. A message. We know you have a wife, and we are prepared to litigate. Marcus's response was swift and brutal. It started with the money. The generous personal allowance that was deposited into Isabella's account each month vanished. Her credit cards were declined. The accounts Evelyn had helped her set up were frozen by a court order Marcus's lawyers obtained, citing suspicious activity. He was cutting off her oxygen. Next came the isolation. The household staff, the cook, the housekeeper, the gardeners were all dismissed overnight. The mansion became truly silent, empty except for Isabella and Evelyn. Deliveries stopped. The gates were locked with new security codes. They were in effect under siege in their own command center. Then the psychological warfare began. The story of the incident at Aurelia was leaked, but with a malicious twist. The narrative pushed by gossip blogs and society columnists friendly with Catherine Davenport was that Isabella was an unstable, obsessive former employee who had stalked Marcus, deluding herself into believing they were in a relationship. They painted her as a classic gold digger who, upon being rejected, was now attempting to extort the benevolent billionaire. They even produced a witness, a former waitress at Isabella's old job, who claimed Isabella often fantasized about snaring a rich husband. Isabella was horrified watching her name and reputation being systematically dismantled. "How can they just print these lies?" she asked Evelyn, her hands shaking as she read a particularly vicious article. "They have the biggest megaphone," Evelyn replied, calmly unfazed. "This is a classic deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender strategy. He's not just trying to discredit you, he's trying to provoke you into making a public statement. He still wants you to violate that NDA." But Marcus had underestimated the woman Isabella was becoming. Every attack seemed to temper her resolve, making it stronger. "He thinks he can starve me out, isolate me, and shame me into submission," Isabella said, her voice low. "He thinks I'm still that waitress who was afraid of her own shadow." With their physical resources dwindling, Evelyn initiated the next phase of their plan. "It's time to rattle the other side of the cage," she said. Catherine Davenport. Using a private investigator, Evelyn compiled a dossier on Marcus's new fiancée. On the surface, Catherine was perfect old money, a Vassar education, and a seat on the board of her father's media company. But digging deeper, the investigator found a pattern of high-stakes gambling and several discreet rehab stays for a shopping addiction. Catherine lived far beyond her official means and her family's company, while Vast was carrying a significant amount of debt. The merger with Thorn Dynamics wasn't just a strategic alliance for Marcus. For the Davenports, it was a financial lifeline. Evelyn packaged this information, the gambling debts, the precarious state of her family's finances, into an anonymous email. She didn't send it to Catherine. She sent it to her father, Harrison Davenport, a notoriously proud and controlling patriarch. The email contained no threats, only information ending with a simple, chilling question. Does Marcus Thorn know that the empire he's marrying into is a house of cards? And do you know the real value of the heir he has promised you? The effect was immediate. 2 days later, Isabella, looking out a window, saw a sleek black town car pull up to the locked gates. A furious-looking Catherine Davenport got out and began shouting at the intercom, demanding to be let in. "Showtime," Evelyn said with a tight smile. Isabella, with Evelyn listening in on an open line, went to the intercom. "Catherine," she said, her voice even. "What a surprise!" "You bitch!" Catherine shrieked, her voice thin and shrill. "What have you done? You're ruining everything." "I haven't done anything, Catherine," Isabella replied coolly. "I'm just a surrogate, remember? That's what Marcus told everyone. My father is questioning the merger. He's talking about invoking the penalty clauses. You need to stop whatever it is you're doing and sign the papers. Take your money and disappear." "What papers? What money?" Isabella asked, playing dumb. "Marcus cut me off completely. And as far as I know, the only paper I ever signed was a marriage license." There was a sputtering on the other end of the intercom. That's a lie. Is it? Why don't you ask Marcus to show you the surrogacy contract? See if his signature is on it. Or better yet, ask him to show you the proof that he can even have the heir he's promised your father," Isabella said, delivering the line Evelyn had coached her on. She wasn't revealing the truth, just planting a seed of doubt in the most fertile ground possible. "You're insane," Catherine hissed, but the conviction was gone from her voice. A flicker of uncertainty had replaced it. She got back in her car and sped away. "Phase 2 complete," Evelyn said. "We've introduced a destabilizing element into their alliance. Now they'll start to question each other. And a partnership built on lies cannot withstand scrutiny." But Marcus's empire was striking back on another front. The next evening there was a loud official knock on the door. It was a process server. He handed Isabella a thick envelope. It was a court order. Marcus was filing for an emergency restraining order, claiming Isabella was mentally unstable and harassing him and his fiancée. Appended to it was a more chilling motion, a petition to establish sole custody and guardianship of the fetus, citing the mother's erratic behavior and the surrogacy agreement as evidence that she was merely a gestational carrier with no legal rights. He had attached a heavily redacted and likely forged version of the contract. He was making a direct move for the baby. Isabella felt a primal fear grip her. This went beyond money or revenge. This was about her child. "What do we do?" she asked Evelyn, her voice barely a whisper. Evelyn's face was grim. "He's forcing our hand," she said. "He's taking the fight into the open. He thinks we'll be afraid. He thinks we'll buckle. He's wrong." She picked up her phone. "It's time to call our star witness." She dialed a number. "Ben, it's Evelyn Reed. We're going to court, and we need you to bring the truth with you." The boardroom on the 50th floor of the new Thorn Dynamics Tower was less a room and more a declaration of dominance. It was a sterile, cold expanse of glass and steel seemingly floating in the sky. One entire wall was a seamless window offering a breathtaking, godlike panorama of the city sprawling below a kingdom over which Marcus Thorn presided. The conference table was a single monolithic slab of black marble polished to such a perfect mirror finish that it reflected the tense faces of those gathered around it, like souls trapped in ice. At the head of this imposing table sat Marcus, the enthroned king in his domain. He was flanked by two lawyers, a man and a woman, whose expensive suits and predatory stillness made them look like well-dressed sharks. To his right, Catherine Davenport sat with a rigid posture, her triumphant smirk from the restaurant now replaced with a palpable anxiety, her hand resting near his as if for reassurance. Beside her, her father, Harrison Davenport, observed the proceedings with the shrewd, impassive gaze of a man who had built a media empire by devouring his competitors. His presence was a heavy weight in the room. He was not an observer, but a judge. Opposite them, in chairs that suddenly seemed very small, sat Isabella and Evelyn Reed. Isabella felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. The terror that had haunted her for weeks was gone, burned away by a righteous fury. She looked at Marcus, truly looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see the charming billionaire who had swept her off her feet. She saw a hollow man, a fragile ego wrapped in money and power. She felt the weight of Evelyn's presence beside her, a bastion of quiet, unshakable confidence. This wasn't an execution, she realized. It was an exorcism. The silence was broken by Marcus, who leaned forward, steepling his fingers. His voice, when it came, was a silken weapon, dripping with condescension and feigned magnanimity. "Well," he began, a lazy smile playing on his lips as he addressed Evelyn, though his eyes kept flicking dismissively toward Isabella. "I'm a busy man, so let's get this unfortunate business over with. My legal team has advised me that out of the goodness of my heart, a gesture of goodwill is in order to expedite this situation." He gestured to his male lawyer, who spoke in a flat, monotone voice. "Mr. Thorne is prepared to offer your client a one-time ex gratia payment of $20,000. Marcus held up a hand, resuming control. "A little something for her troubles, for the confusion she seems to have experienced. However, this payment is contingent on her immediate signature on a comprehensive non-disclosure and relinquishment agreement." He leaned back, the smile widening. "The terms are simple. She will cede any and all fabricated claims against me or my family. She will agree to supervised visitation with a court-appointed psychologist to ensure a stable mental state leading up to the delivery. After the product, the asset, is delivered, she will have no further contact. She will relinquish all parental rights, of course, as per our original understanding. She will move out of my house within 12 hours and will never again attempt to contact me, my fiancé, or any employee of my company. It's more than generous. It's a gift." He let the word gift hang in the air, a final insult wrapped in a veneer of charity. Catherine allowed a small, cruel smile to touch her lips. Harrison Davenport remained unreadable, his eyes narrowed. Isabella felt a tremor of her old fear, but she met Marcus's gaze, her spine straight. She would not let him see her break. Evelyn Reed didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at the settlement paper one of the lawyers slid across the vast expanse of marble. She let it sit there, an island of lies in a sea of truth. "My client rejects your offer, Mr. Thorne," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the smug atmosphere with the precision of a scalpel. Marcus chuckled, a low, arrogant sound. "Rejects it? On what grounds is she holding out for $30,000? Don't be greedy, Ms. Rossi," he said, directing the comment at Isabella. "It's a bad look." "My client rejects your offer because she is not for sale," Evelyn stated plainly, "and neither is her child." She paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing them to lean into her next words. "However, we are prepared to make a counteroffer, a proposal to resolve this matter amicably and permanently." Harrison Davenport leaned forward slightly, his first sign of genuine interest. "And what is your proposal, Ms. Reed?" "It's quite simple," Evelyn said, her expression open and reasonable. "My client wants nothing from Mr. Thorne. No money, no settlement, no property." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Marcus's lawyers exchanged a baffled look. Marcus himself frowned, his confidence faltering for the first time. This was off script. She is prepared to walk away from this entire ordeal. Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping from Marcus to Harrison. She has just one condition, a single non-negotiable term. She wishes for Mr. Thorne to hold a press conference right here in this building. She wants him to stand side by side with his beautiful fiancée, Catherine, and his esteemed future father-in-law, Harrison Davenport, and announce to the world his profound joy. He is to celebrate the impending birth of his firstborn child, his biological son and heir. The trap was laid. It was elegant in its simplicity. She had weaponized his own obsession against him. His legacy, his public image, his deal with the Davenports, all of it rested on the lie of his virility. A press conference, Marcus's lawyer scoffed. That's absurd. We're not here to plan a PR event. This is a legal settlement. On the contrary, Evelyn replied smoothly, this is the settlement. What could be more reasonable? A man like Marcus Thorne, a man so concerned with his dynasty, should be shouting from the rooftops. This is a chance to solidify the Thorne-Davenport union, to show the world the strength and future of your combined empires. Unless, of course, there's some reason you wouldn't want to publicly claim your own child. The question hung in the air like a toxic gas. Marcus looked cornered. He saw the logic. He saw the PR victory it would hand him. But he also saw the jaws of the trap closing around him. To agree would be to publicly embrace a lie he could never walk back. To refuse would be inexplicable. She is not his wife. Catherine finally burst out, her voice high and shrill, her carefully constructed composure shattering. This is harassment. The baby is the result of a business arrangement. Evelyn turned her cool gaze to Catherine. Really? She reached into her briefcase and retrieved a document, sliding it across the table. It landed right in front of Harrison Davenport. It wasn't the surrogacy contract. It was a pristine gold-embossed copy of the official Bahamian marriage certificate. Because the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, a sovereign nation, seems to believe that Isabella Rossi and Marcus Thorne were legally wed on October 14th of last year. A contract for gestational services, particularly one a party, was fraudulently induced into signing under the pretense of it being a prenuptial agreement, does not magically invalidate a legal marriage, Mr. Davenport. Your daughter is the other woman. My client is Mrs. Isabella Thorne. Harrison Davenport stared at the marriage certificate, his face hardening into a granite mask. He looked at Marcus, a silent, deadly question in his eyes. Why the hesitation, Marcus? Harrison finally asked, his voice a low growl that held more menace than a shout. My daughter's reputation is now on the line. This girl claims she is your wife. You claim she is a surrogate carrying your child. The simplest way to clarify the situation is to embrace your narrative. Let's call the press. Let's celebrate your heir. Marcus was sweating now, tiny beads forming on his brow. This is not the time or place. Isabella knew this was her moment. She had rehearsed it 1,000 times in her mind, and now the words came to her clear and steady. She stood up, a single defiant figure against the glittering skyline. The move drew every eye in the room. He's hesitating, Mr. Davenport, she said, her voice resonating with a strength she never knew she possessed. She walked slowly, deliberately to the head of the table where Marcus sat trapped. Her eyes never left his. He's hesitating because he is a fraud. He is a liar. She reached into her pocket and took out the small, unmarked USB stick Ben had given her. With a steady hand, she placed it on the polished marble directly in front of Harrison Davenport. It made a soft, definitive sound in the silent room. Marcus isn't just lying about me being his wife, she said, her voice rising with power, each word a hammer blow against his crumbling facade. He's lying about the baby. He's lying about his legacy. He's lying about the very foundation of the deal he made with you. He is lying about everything. Harrison picked up the USB stick, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a live grenade. And what is this supposed to be? That Evelyn Reed said standing to join Isabella is the truth. It is the complete unredacted and certified medical file of Marcus R. Thorne from the Weissman Clinic in Zurich, dated 6 months before he even met my client. It proves conclusively and scientifically that Mr. Thorne suffers from azoospermia. It proves that he is medically sterile and has been for the last 5 years. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a physical thing, a crushing weight that sucked the very air from the room. Catherine Davenport made a small choking sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus Thorne went utterly white, his face a mask of abject terror. The king had been stripped bare in his own throne room. And to corroborate that, Evelyn continued, her voice merciless, the drive also contains a sworn affidavit from his former chief financial officer, Mr. Benjamin Carter. Appended to it is a complete copy of Thorne Dynamics' shadow ledger detailing not only the offshore payments to a premium European sperm bank for the conception of this child, but also the systemic financial fraud used to inflate the company's valuation by nearly 30% ahead of your merger negotiations. As if on cue, the heavy doors to the boardroom swung open. Benjamin Carter, looking older and wearier but with a fire of vindication in his eyes, walked in. He held a leather briefcase. He stopped and looked directly at his former boss. "It's all there, Mr. Davenport," Ben said, his voice steady. "Every dollar, every lie. The man built his empire on sand. His company's value is a fiction, and his promise of an heir is a biological impossibility." Harrison Davenport looked from the USB stick to Ben, then to the ashen, shattered face of Marcus Thorne, and finally to his own daughter, whose face was a crumpled, tear-streaked ruin of disbelief and humiliation. The truth in all its ugly, brutal detail had finally been brought into the light. Marcus didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared at Isabella, his eyes vacant, seeing not the woman he had tried to destroy, but the architect of his annihilation, the master of the universe. The man who moved markets and ruined lives with a phone call had been utterly and completely checkmated by the waitress he had tried to throw away. And in the chilling silence of that boardroom 50 floors above the city, he thought he owned his entire world came crashing down. In the end, Marcus Thorne lost everything. The Davenport deal imploded, taking his company's stock and reputation with it. He faced a barrage of lawsuits from investors and a federal investigation for fraud. Catherine left him her family's media empire, gleefully reporting on his spectacular fall from grace. Isabella, guided by Evelyn, negotiated a quiet divorce and a settlement that ensured she and her baby would be secure for life. She never wanted his money for herself, but she would ensure her child had every advantage. More importantly, she had her freedom, her dignity, and her name back. She was no one's surrogate. She was Isabella Rossi, a mother, an artist, and a survivor who had faced a monster and won. This story is a powerful reminder that truth is the ultimate weapon and that courage can be found in the most unexpected places.
Millionaire takes mistress to wife's birthday party, but his pregnant wife makes a life-changing decision. A polished limousine idles outside the grand gates of the Harrington estate in Manhattan, its engine humming like an anxious heartbeat. On this crisp spring evening, a glamorous party unfolds inside, meant to celebrate the wife of multi-billionaire Alexander Harrington. Yet, as guests sip vintage champagne and gossip about the latest tabloids, a scandalous sight turns every head. The billionaire arrives not with his wife on his arm, but with a stunning young woman few recognize. Whispers ripple through the crowd, for Alexander's pregnant wife is still inside, oblivious to the social earthquake about to strike on her very own birthday. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to scandal. A charismatic entrepreneur known for his sweeping business conquests, he had always carried with him an air of insatiable ambition. The Harrington name was woven into the fabric of New York's high society. His philanthropic galas attracted major figures like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and even foreign dignitaries. He lived in a sprawling estate overlooking Central Park, a testament to his unimaginable wealth. For years, the public had lauded him for his confidence, generosity, and devilish smile. In private, however, there were darker rumors swirling, stories of backroom deals, hush money, and quiet heartbreaks. On the surface, Alexander's marriage to Clarissa Taylor Harrington was a picture of perfection. Clarissa, an Oxford-educated art historian, came from old money herself. Her father had bankrolled the expansions of major art museums across Europe. Photographs in the tabloids and glossy magazines featured Clarissa's radiant smile and Alexander's unwavering arm around her shoulders. They were the golden couple who seemed to have it all: the looks, the lineage, the wealth. They graced the covers of lifestyle publications, donating substantial sums to children's hospitals and educational initiatives. Clarissa often accompanied Alexander to high-stakes business meetings, proving herself as a formidable negotiator. Anyone who saw them in those early days believed they were unstoppable together. Yet success came with a cost. Before long, Alexander began to distance himself from Clarissa. He poured himself into building Harrington Global, a conglomerate that spanned tech investments, real estate, and environmental solutions. Late nights in the office, trips overseas to broker major deals, and social events that Clarissa wasn't invited to became routine. Despite her growing suspicions, Clarissa tried to remain supportive, especially when she discovered she was pregnant. She planned to surprise Alexander with the news at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish gathering where she hoped they could reconnect in front of their closest friends and family. As the big night approached, the house buzzed with preparations. Lavish flower arrangements arrived in waves, filling the mansion with the scent of white orchids and subtle honeysuckle. Crystal chandeliers were polished to a sparkling sheen. The catering team meticulously planned a 12-course meal featuring delicacies flown in from around the world. Clarissa's father, Winston Taylor, personally ensured that the guest list was curated with dignitaries, celebrities, and old family friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alexander was finishing up a secret dinner at an exclusive Michelin star restaurant with a woman named Sophia de la Cruz. Sophia had entered his life barely a year ago as a marketing consultant. Young, ambitious, and undeniably captivating, she had quickly become more than just a professional acquaintance. Alexander found himself enthralled by her energy and fresh perspective. Their bond deepened behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi's watchful eyes. Like a siren's call, Sophia offered the excitement that Alexander felt he was missing. She encouraged his most extravagant desires and made him feel invincible. That night, while Clarissa went over last-minute arrangements for her birthday party, Alexander decided to invite Sophia. It was a decision born of arrogance, fueled by the high that came from believing he could control any situation. How could there be any repercussions, he reasoned. He was Alexander Harrington, after all, a man who shaped the narrative. He believed the world danced to his tune. Little did he know, the stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. Clarissa's birthday party shimmered with the promise of a memorable evening. The estate's grand ballroom was alight with crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across the polished marble floors. Velvet draped tables were topped with elegant centerpieces of orchids, peonies, and flickering gold candles. A string quartet performed in a corner, their music weaving seamlessly through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Clarissa, dressed in a flowing silk gown that draped delicately over her growing bump, greeted each guest with warmth. Though her pregnancy was a secret to most, the subtle curvature of her abdomen gave hints of the new life stirring within her. She planned to share the joyful announcement. That night, her father was to toast her birthday. Then she would offer the news, hoping to see the stunned but happy expression on Alexander's face. Among the attendees were several notable figures. Her father Winston, who stood proud in a tailored navy suit, fashion icon Isabella Quinn, who had designed Clarissa's gown, real estate mogul Kenton Cross, and even the mayor of New York City, who had come to pay tribute to the Harringtons. Conversations swirled around potential deals, philanthropic endeavors, and the latest headlines. Yet, a peculiar restlessness hung in the air. It was as if the entire estate sensed an unspoken tension. About an hour into the festivities, a hush began to spread from the entrance. People craned their necks toward the foyer where Alexander had just arrived. He stood tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a manner reminiscent of old Hollywood stars. But it wasn't Alexander's arrival that captured everyone's shock. It was the presence of the woman on his arm, Sophia de la Cruz, in a figure-hugging red gown that shimmered with sequins, walked with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the room. Heads turned as she stepped forward, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk. She seemed well aware of the spotlight that fell upon her. Though many recognized her from social media posts and marketing conferences, they struggled to comprehend why she was here at Clarissa's birthday celebration, especially in such an intimate capacity. Confusion and whispers rippled among the guests. Some glanced toward Clarissa, who, from across the room, locked eyes with her husband. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. She froze momentarily, gripping the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that it nearly shattered. The unthinkable had happened. Alexander had not only chosen to bring Sophia to the party, he had done so brazenly, in full public view. Clarissa felt her cheeks flush with a blend of rage and humiliation. This was supposed to be her special night, and she had spent weeks meticulously organizing every detail. The sting was unbearable. Before she could fully process her shock, Winston hurried to her side, quietly asking what was going on. She shook her head, unable to offer an answer. Alexander attempted to mask any awkwardness with a broad, confident grin. He guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom as though nothing was amiss. Some guests, loyal to Clarissa, turned away in disgust or disapproval. Others, ever the opportunists, flocked to greet the new arrival, eager to glean inside information. Moments later, a hush once again fell over the crowd as Alexander approached Clarissa. They stood face to face. Sophia hovered just behind him like a sinister shadow. "Happy birthday, darling," Alexander said, leaning in to place a perfunctory kiss on Clarissa's cheek. His words felt as cold as the tension they generated. The air crackled. An uncertain hush befell the entire ballroom. Clarissa's emotions collided, anger, hurt, and betrayal swirling into a perfect storm. She felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to allow them to fall. Not here, not surrounded by these people. Summoning the composure that had been drilled into her since birth, she merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Alexander stepped aside, and Sophia stepped forward, offering a polite, "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Clarissa. I've heard so much about you." Clarissa could barely bring herself to respond. Likewise, she managed, a single word laced with tension. Though outwardly the exchange appeared cordial, everyone in proximity sensed the electric undertones. Clarissa's father, feeling his daughter's silent plea, quickly took the microphone to begin the evening's formal toasts. The dinner was about to begin, and beneath the veneer of elegant conversation and polished smiles, a storm of betrayal brewed. The banquet hall glowed under candlelight, each course served by a fleet of uniformed waitstaff moving with practiced precision. Crystal glasses tinkled softly as servers poured top-shelf wine. Guests engaged in polite chit-chat at the round tables, though their eyes often wandered back to the triangle forming among Clarissa, Alexander, and Sophia. Clarissa sat at the head table, flanked by Winston on one side and Alexander on the other. Sophia was positioned uncomfortably close, just a seat away from Alexander. The arrangement had been made long before the identity of Alexander's guest had been revealed. Clarissa's mother had assumed Alexander would bring a business associate or perhaps a friend, never suspecting the truth. Tension hung thick in the air. Clarissa struggled to keep her posture upright, silently pleading for the night to pass quickly. She could feel the soft flutter of her baby within her, a gentle reminder of the delicate life she was fighting to protect. She forced a smile every time a guest raised a toast to her. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. Why did Alexander do this? How could he be so cruel? Halfway through dinner, Winston rose from his seat to give a formal birthday speech for his daughter. By then, a hush fell over the chatter as everyone turned their attention to the proud father. I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a beautiful, accomplished woman, Winston began, his voice filled with affection. She has brought light into this family with her passion for art, her compassionate heart, and her unwavering loyalty. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to Clarissa, who has never ceased to amaze me. Happy birthday, my dear. Applause reverberated around the room, but Clarissa found herself trembling. She had planned to make her big announcement during the speech's aftermath, but the presence of Sophia made her question everything. Should she still reveal her pregnancy now? Should she keep it secret a while longer? Her internal debate was cut short when Winston nodded for Clarissa to stand. Summoning her courage, she placed a hand over her tummy, the other gripping her champagne flute. A trembling breath escaped her lips. Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight. 1. I have a little surprise to share with everyone. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Alexander, whose expression was unreadable. Sophia was watching intently, almost hungrily, like a spectator waiting for the next act of a play. Clarissa mustered her composure and announced, I'm expecting a baby. Alexander and I are going to have our first child. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by applause from well-wishers. Many guests, unaware of the undercurrents, rose to congratulate her. Winston embraced his daughter, tears glistening in his proud eyes. Alexander, for his part, feigned a smile. He leaned over to Clarissa and brushed a quick kiss on her cheek, whispering, You might have told me sooner. It was a cutting remark, delivered in the presence of dozens of curious onlookers. Clarissa's heart clenched. She had expected a look of joy, or at least a flicker of genuine excitement, but all she found was mild annoyance. Even so, she endured the subsequent flood of well-wishers, politely accepting their hugs and handshakes. Meanwhile, she caught glimpses of Sophia's face, which remained surprisingly composed. There was no overt jealousy or shock, just an eerie calm that sent chills down Clarissa's spine. When dessert was served, a decadent 3-tier chocolate confection, the festive atmosphere had dimmed. Clarissa attempted to maintain conversations with guests, but found her mind drifting. She watched Alexander and Sophia from the corner of her eye, noticing how often he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, and how she laughed quietly in return. It felt as though Clarissa had been cast as a minor character in her own celebration. The humiliation was impossible to ignore, yet beneath her hurt lay an unexpected ripple of resolve. This is my child, and I will not let Alexander's reckless behavior overshadow that. She pressed a hand against her still-growing belly. One thing was becoming clear: her future and her babies could no longer rest solely in Alexander's hands. After dinner, guests mingled in the expansive lounge area, sipping espresso and enjoying after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble took the stage, their smooth melodies drifting through the corridors. Several high-profile attendees began to make discreet exits, though many lingered, perhaps hoping to witness whatever spectacle might unfold. Clarissa stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames offering fleeting warmth in a room that felt increasingly cold. She was trying to console herself with small talk alongside her longtime friend, Isabella Quinn. Isabella, a notable fashion designer, had been privy to Clarissa's suspicions for months. She knew how desperately Clarissa had clung to the hope of restoring her marriage. Now, the sight of Sophia's brazen presence threatened to shatter Clarissa's composure. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her eyes flicking to Alexander across the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. "I'm not sure. I feel humiliated, but also strangely liberated." Isabella nodded. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Clarissa could reply, Alexander approached them, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said, placing a cursory hand on Clarissa's shoulder, "I'm going to step outside to talk business for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Clarissa eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Alexander scowled. "Don't start, Clarissa. Not now." He turned on his heel, leaving Clarissa with Isabella, her question unanswered. Clarissa felt a surge of anger at his dismissiveness. In front of dozens of guests and the press, he had effectively shoved aside her feelings on her own birthday. Minutes later, Clarissa noticed Sophia slip through a side door that led toward the garden terrace. Curiosity and a growing sense of indignation fueled her to follow. She excused herself from Isabella and made her way through the throng of guests, slipping out into the cool night air. The garden was beautifully landscaped, accented by floodlights illuminating carefully trimmed hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood silent guard amidst the greenery. Clarissa found Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "So," Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you decided to come to my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up. Instead of surprise or guilt, she merely offered a pitying smile. "Alexander insisted I come. He said it was important for us to be seen together." Clarissa felt the urge to snap back, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Tell me, does it bother you at all that he's married and expecting a child?" Sophia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Alexander and I, we have something real. He made it clear your relationship was falling apart. I never thought you'd be pregnant." Clarissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She wondered how long Alexander had carried on these lies, painting her as some distant, loveless wife. Every syllable from Sophia's mouth fed Clarissa's fury. "Did he tell you that I was distant because he was never home?" Clarissa fired back, her voice shaking. "That I stopped trusting him because he kept secrets? You may think you have something real, but let me tell you, Alexander's version of truth is as malleable as clay." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's different with me. I'm not here to fight you, Clarissa. I just came because he asked me to." A sudden wave of nausea swelled within Clarissa, anger and heartbreak roiling together. She pressed a hand over her belly, inhaling slowly to calm herself. The last thing she wanted was to faint or cause a scene that might harm her baby. "No, you're not here to fight," Clarissa said. "But you're playing a dangerous game. Remember, the man who cheats with you can cheat on you just as easily." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but the tension was shattered by the sound of footsteps. They both turned to see Winston stepping into the garden, worry etched across his features. "Clarissa, are you all right?" Clarissa straightened her posture. "I'm fine, Father." The older man looked between Clarissa and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation in progress. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was a coldness in Winston's eyes as he addressed Sophia. "Miss Dela Cruz, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter." Sophia hesitated, then gracefully slid past them and back into the mansion. Once she was gone, Winston took Clarissa's hand. "This is unacceptable," he murmured. "I won't stand by and watch my daughter be humiliated." Clarissa exhaled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. "I know, but I need time to think, Father. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby." Winston pulled her into a gentle embrace, the garden's stillness enveloping them. "I'll support whatever decision you make." And as the moonlight bathed them in its glow, Clarissa realized she was at a crossroads. One path led back inside to Alexander, to their marriage, to the heartbreak. The other path remained uncertain, but it offered a hope for dignity and independence that she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after most guests had gone home, the Harrington estate finally settled into an uneasy silence. The staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of the lavish party, collecting empty champagne flutes and disposing of flower arrangements that had begun to wilt under the harsh light. Clarissa retreated to her bedroom suite, feeling a lifetime older than she had at the start of the night. She slipped off her silk gown, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now that she no longer wore a loose dress. She ran her hand across her abdomen, feeling the comforting presence of her unborn child. "Is this how I want to raise you?" she thought, "in a household where your father disrespects me so openly?" Down the hall, the door to Alexander's study was slightly ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, accompanied by the faint aroma of whiskey. Clarissa took a deep breath and walked toward it, determined to confront him, but also to keep her emotions in check. She found Alexander behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when she entered. "Clarissa," he greeted, though his voice lacked warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "What you did tonight was humiliating," she began, her voice a subdued tremor. "On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here?" Alexander rubbed his temples, exhaling. "Look, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But you've known our relationship has been strained for a long time. Sophia is part of my life now." Clarissa bristled. "And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." A flicker of guilt flickered in his eyes, then vanished. "I know that," he said tersely, "but you've made no attempt to support me in my ventures. You constantly criticize my absences, my business expansions, my choices." Clarissa stared at him in disbelief. "Because you constantly push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you vanish on another business trip or stay out late with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself?" He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand before her. She realized how tired he looked, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a man under pressure. Yet sympathy was hard to muster when she remembered Sophia's smug presence. "I'm under tremendous stress," Alexander said, pacing the length of the room. "We're finalizing an international deal with the Saudis. I have a board meeting next week that could make or break the new technology division. And now we have a baby on the way, something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to everyone tonight." Clarissa's anger flared again. "I planned to tell you privately, but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal, let alone a meaningful conversation." Alexander rested his hands on the back of an ornate chair, letting out a long breath. "I can't do this right now." She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "If you won't choose to be a husband and father, then I'll make a choice for myself and this child." Her words hung in the air like a distant thunderclap. Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Clarissa said, her voice firmer now, "I'm considering leaving. I can't endure this spectacle. Not for me, and not for our baby." Alexander's face paled, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Clarissa realized she had made her decision. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like a trophy wife while he flaunted his affair in her face. Without waiting for his reply, she turned on her heel and left the study. Her steps echoed in the corridor, each one a resolute stride toward whatever future she would create away from this toxic environment. In her bedroom, Clarissa shut the door and rested her back against it. She felt a swirl of emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but also an unexpected sense of freedom. She was done pretending everything was fine, done playing the role of the compliant wife while her husband publicly undermined her. Tomorrow, the press would likely run scandalous headlines. Social media might explode with speculation, but tonight, as she placed a protective hand over her unborn child, Clarissa felt a calm resolve. She would not be defined by Alexander's betrayal. She would forge her own path, even if she had to go through heartbreak to find it. The next morning arrived with a clamor of news vans outside the estate's gates. Word had leaked from the party, perhaps from a staff member or an opportunistic guest, about the shocking drama. A billionaire husband bringing his mistress to his pregnant wife's birthday celebration. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story, hungry for exclusive interviews or even a single photograph that captured the tension. Clarissa awoke to the sounds of muffled shouting below her window. She peered through the curtains and saw a small crowd of reporters, cameras at the ready. Her heart sank at the spectacle. She had grown up under the public's gaze, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She prepared herself for the day with steady determination. Slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she summoned the household staff and informed them. She would handle any necessary statements herself. She then called her personal lawyer, Margaret Lee, a formidable mind in family law. "Margaret," Clarissa said when the call connected, "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated. Alexander has openly brought another woman into our marriage, and I need to protect myself and my baby." Margaret's calm voice offered reassurance. "We can discuss your options: prenups, child custody, financial support, property division. The media storm will be intense, but we can manage it. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please." Clarissa exhaled. "I'd like to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later." Alexander, meanwhile, had already left the estate for his office, avoiding the reporters gathered outside. Clarissa suspected he'd do damage control from behind a conference table, likely spinning a narrative that made him appear the victim of marital discord. His statement would undoubtedly gloss over his blatant betrayal, focusing instead on their incompatibilities. Clarissa was determined not to be caught off guard by his rhetoric. By mid-morning, Margaret Lee arrived, carefully navigating her way through the reporters. She was a short, impeccably dressed woman who exuded both warmth and steely resolve. They sat together in the sunlit parlor, far from prying ears. "Clarissa, the first question is, do you intend to remain married?" Margaret asked, pulling out a notepad. Clarissa took a long moment to consider. Memories flashed through her mind: her wedding day, the joy they once shared, the nights spent discussing dreams for the future, and the gradual drift into secrecy and lies. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't see a way forward with Alexander. He's made it clear he's invested in someone else. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability." Margaret nodded, jotting notes. "Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement does entitle you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Alexander can't manipulate his financials." Clarissa's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "And the baby? I want to make sure custody is clarified." Margaret's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. "We'll arrange for shared custody, though you can request primary custody if you can prove it's in the child's best interest." Given Alexander's public behavior, it shouldn't be too difficult. They spent the next hour outlining a plan, reviewing documents, and strategizing how to handle the inevitable media onslaught. Winston joined them midway, offering both emotional support and financial resources. Clarissa felt a surge of gratitude for her father's unwavering presence. Despite everything, she was not alone. As Margaret departed, Clarissa steeled herself to face the reporters outside. She stepped out onto the front steps of the estate, her father by her side. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Microphones jostled for position as frenzied voices called out her name. Clarissa raised a hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions. All I can say is that Alexander Harrington and I are dealing with personal matters, and my primary concern is the well-being of my unborn child." "Are you divorcing Mr. Harrington?" a reporter shouted. Clarissa paused, meeting the cacophony of eyes and lenses head-on. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options. That's all I can share for now." She turned to leave, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions. Though her heart pounded, she felt a newfound sense of courage. This was the beginning of her own narrative one, where she would no longer be overshadowed by Alexander's towering presence. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her. Clarissa's resolve crystallized. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the little life growing within her. The drama had only begun, but Clarissa was ready to fight for her future. Across town, in the Harrington Global headquarters, Alexander paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was laser-focused on the crisis at hand. "You promised me this merger would go smoothly," he barked into the phone. "Now the board is panicking because of the media circus around my personal life. I need a statement from PR immediately." On the other end of the line was Harrington Global's chief communications officer, a man named Bradley Swain. He attempted to maintain professionalism despite Alexander's aggressive tone. "We have a draft statement ready to go. However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your spouse. The tabloids are having a field day with the rumors." Alexander exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Clarissa's not cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak with me." Bradley's hesitation was evident. "With all due respect, if you and Miss S. Harrington appear combative, it could harm the company's public image even more. The board wants stability." Alexander slammed a fist onto his desk. "If the board is so concerned, they can remember how much Harrington Global owes to my leadership. Get the statement ready." He hung up abruptly and sank into his leather chair. His reflection in the polished surface of the desk stared back at him, a man who prided himself on control, now embroiled in a scandal that was spiraling out of his hands. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, presumably from Sophia and from other acquaintances wanting clarity or, worse, gossip. Just then, Kenton Cross knocked on the open door. A long-time associate in real estate, Kenton had been invited to the birthday party fiasco and had witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Alexander," Kenton remarked, seating himself across from the desk. "The business community is whispering about whether you can handle your personal life, let alone these billion-dollar deals." Alexander bristled. "I know how to manage my personal affairs. The tabloids will move on once something else catches their attention." Kenton folded his arms, eyeing Alexander critically. "And your wife? She looks serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? I've been poring over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options." Kenton shook his head. "But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Clarissa. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, You'll be painted as the callous husband who flaunted his mistress. You might win the merger, but you'll lose the court of public opinion, and that can hurt your bottom line in the long run. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a headache bloom behind his eyes. So what do you suggest? Speak to her, Kenton replied evenly. Come to an arrangement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more critical than stroking your ego. Alexander glared at him, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, stakeholder confidence, and the allure of success. The scandal was tarnishing that aura. Stocks had already dipped slightly, and rumors swirled of potential investors pulling out. After Kenton left, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sophia. He stared at the screen, weighing whether to answer. Finally, he picked up. What do you need? He asked curtly. Sophia's voice was soft. I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a home wrecker, saying all sorts of things online. He sighed heavily. It'll blow over. Don't respond to them. There was a brief pause. And us? Where do we stand if Clarissa files for divorce? Alexander's mind reeled. He pictured his future, either losing massive chunks of his estate in a bitter divorce or fighting Clarissa in court. Neither option seemed appealing. I don't know, he finally admitted. I need time to think. He ended the call without a proper goodbye, tossing his phone onto the desk. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain, cornered. The carefully curated life he'd built was crumbling, his company threatened by rumor, his marriage on the brink, and his mistress already demanding reassurances. The unstoppable Alexander Harrington was suddenly at a loss. Yet even in this low moment, a flicker of stubborn pride coursed through him. He hadn't fought his way to the top to be taken down by gossip and scandal. I can handle this, he told himself. I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top. Over the following week, the media frenzy grew to epic proportions. Magazine covers screamed headlines like Harrington's double life and billionaire's mistress crashes. Pregnant wife's birthday. Talk shows dissected every available crumb of information, inviting body language experts to analyze clips from the birthday party. Social media lit up with hashtags pitting hashtag Team Clarissa against hashtag Team Alexander, although the vast majority appeared to rally around Clarissa. Feeling cornered, Alexander's PR team issued a formal statement. Mr. and Miss S. Harrington are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition. The statement, however, did little to quell the speculation. Rumors surfaced that Clarissa was preparing to file for divorce citing adultery, which carried heavy implications for Alexander's standing in certain conservative business circles. Clarissa maintained a dignified silence, refusing interviews. She entrusted her father Winston to handle any urgent press inquiries, while her lawyer Margaret readied the necessary legal documents. The Harrington estate turned into a fortress, gates closed, security heightened, and staff under strict instructions to turn away all outsiders. Still, life had to continue. Clarissa, who once curated art shows, found herself diving into a new project, a children's arts charity event, something she hoped to do in honor of her baby. She threw herself into philanthropic efforts as a way to cope with her emotional turmoil. Each day brought fresh heartbreak whenever she remembered the betrayal, but she also felt a growing excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn paid frequent visits, offering both creative input on the charity event and emotional support. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and began planning a gala that would bring attention to arts programs for underprivileged youth. Clarissa found a renewed sense of purpose in this project. She might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in making the world a better place. Meanwhile, Alexander fought on the business front. The prospective merger he'd been touting was now at risk. Foreign investors hesitated to link their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even so, he soldiered on with negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees. He also hired a high-powered legal team to mount a defense in the likely divorce proceedings. His lawyers tried various tactics, sending documents that questioned Clarissa's mental state, insinuating she might be unstable due to pregnancy hormones. It was a ruthless strategy designed to protect Alexander's assets and hamper her claims in court. When Clarissa received those documents, she felt physically ill. The insinuation that she was mentally compromised due to pregnancy was more than just an insult. It was a direct threat to her credibility as a prospective mother. Margaret quickly drafted a sharp rebuttal, warning Alexander's team that any further slander would be met with defamation suits. In quieter moments, Clarissa felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as she grieved the happy future she once envisioned with Alexander. But each time, she reminded herself of the new life growing inside her, the gentle flutters that reminded her she was no longer alone. That simple fact fueled her resolve. On day 8 of the media onslaught, Clarissa received a personal phone call from an unexpected ally, Catherine Lyons, a renowned talk show host with a reputation for championing women's rights. Clarissa answered hesitantly. "Clarissa," Catherine said in a soothing tone, "I'd like to invite you for an interview, no gimmicks. Just a chance for you to speak your truth, if you're ready." Clarissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to remain silent, to guard her privacy. But the other part, a growing part, recognized that telling her side of the story might turn the tide in her favor, and possibly set the record straight about her pregnancy, her plans, and her dignity. "I'll consider it," Clarissa answered. "Give me some time." She ended the call, realizing she stood at another crossroads. A public interview could be a powerful weapon in this media war, a chance to reveal Alexander's manipulations without stooping to his legal team's level. Yet it also meant exposing her vulnerabilities before millions of viewers. As she paced the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, Clarissa gently rested a hand on her belly. "Whatever path I choose," she whispered to her child, "I promise it'll be one that leads us to a life of love and respect." And so the battle lines were drawn. Alexander might have commanded armies of lawyers and PR experts, but Clarissa had discovered a deeper strength within herself. The stage was set for the next crucial act of their unfolding drama, the moment she would decide whether to stand in the public eye and reclaim her narrative or stay quiet and let the scandal define her. Clarissa ultimately accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The idea of publicly exposing her pain both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were clear. The chance to correct the rumor mill, to assert her agency, and to make known her intentions for her child's future. After consulting with Margaret and Winston, she agreed to a carefully orchestrated, sit-down interview in a private, tasteful setting, a neutral location that felt neither intrusive nor contrived. On the evening of the interview, Clarissa arrived at Catherine's production studio, which had been converted into a warm, living room-like set. Soft lighting framed 2 comfortable armchairs positioned opposite one another. A small floral arrangement and a table with glasses of water separated them. Off-camera, a minimal crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring the microphone levels were correct and the cameras were rolling smoothly. Catherine greeted Clarissa with a warm hug, whispering, "Remember, you're in control. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Clarissa nodded. She took a steadying breath and settled into her chair, clad in a modest, elegant dress. She appeared every bit the poised socialite, except for the vulnerability in her eyes, which revealed the depth of her turmoil. Once the countdown ended, Catherine opened the interview. "Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Clarissa Taylor Harrington, who's found herself in the eye of a media storm involving her marriage to billionaire Alexander Harrington. Clarissa, thank you for being here. Clarissa offered a polite smile. Thank you for having me, Catherine. Catherine leaned in with genuine concern. You've remained largely silent since the reports emerged of Alexander's affair. Why choose to speak now? Clarissa folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. This past week has been overwhelming. I've been hounded by paparazzi, and my family's privacy has been invaded. But I've also realized that silence allows others to control the narrative. I want people to understand that I am not just Alexander Harrington's wife. I am my own person. And I have my own story. Catherine nodded, leaning forward. I understand you're expecting your first child with Alexander. How has that impacted your decisions? A gentle hand drifted to Clarissa's stomach. Enormously. Becoming a mother changed my perspective on what I'm willing to endure. I realized I can't raise my child in a home filled with deceit. That's not the environment I want for them. Catherine's gaze was sympathetic. What do you say to those who argue that marital problems should be resolved in private? Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. Normally I'd agree. But when someone brings their mistress to your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it's no longer a private matter. It's humiliating, and it forces you to respond. And the media, well, they thrive on sensational stories. Catherine's tone turned more serious. The rumor mill suggests you're seeking divorce. Is that true? A flicker of emotion crossed Clarissa's face. Yes, I'm filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Alexander's affair. It isn't the only problem we've had, but it's the final straw. The studio fell silent as the gravity of her words settled. Catherine glanced at her notes, then chose her next question carefully. There have been allegations from Alexander's legal team that you're emotionally unstable due to your pregnancy. How do you respond? Clarissa's eyes hardened. I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, that's a common tactic to discredit women, especially pregnant women. I'm under a doctor's care, and I'm perfectly capable of making rational decisions. If anything, pregnancy has made me more clear about what I want in life. Catherine nodded, then leaned back with a soft smile. What do you envision for your future and your child's? For a moment, Clarissa's features softened. I want a peaceful life, filled with love, where my child can grow up knowing respect and kindness. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and I hope that my child will one day be proud of the person I've become. The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine praising Clarissa's courage. Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability tonight. I'm sure your story will resonate with many who faced similar betrayals. Clarissa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt free, having shared her truth on her own terms. The cameras powered down, and Catherine stood to hug her again, whispering, "You are amazing. Stay strong." By the time Clarissa emerged from the studio, she found Winston waiting for her. He gently took her arm. "Proud of you, my girl," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Clarissa managed a weak smile. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" Winston nodded, guiding her toward the waiting car. "Yes, but at least now, you're writing your own story." She climbed into the vehicle, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere in the labyrinth of skyscrapers stood Alexander, likely watching the interview and scrambling for his next move. But for Clarissa, the course was set. No longer a silent victim, she embraced this new chapter with resolve. Whatever awaited, she wouldn't face it as the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's arrogance. She was a mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future with every ounce of courage she had. Alexander did indeed watch the interview from his penthouse apartment. The crisp, modern furnishings offered little comfort as Clarissa's words sank in. She had confirmed the divorce publicly, exposing his affair in a calm, dignified manner that made him seem like a heartless villain. His phone vibrated incessantly with texts and calls, business partners, board members, friends, and even Sophia. He finally answered Sophia's call. "Did you watch it?" he asked, voice taut. "I did," Sophia replied. "It's not good for you, Alexander. Public sympathy is with Clarissa. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're—" She trailed off, as if reluctant to finish the sentence. Alexander ground his teeth. "I'm what, Sophia?" she sighed. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is destroying you. The board might oust you if the stocks continue to dip." A hot flush of panic coursed through Alexander, though he struggled to maintain composure. "I can't be ousted from my own company. I control the majority shares." "Yes, but if confidence in you drops enough, they might find a way. You've made some enemies on the board over the years." Alexander inhaled sharply, recalling the tense board meetings where he'd forced through expansions, ignoring cautionary advice. Perhaps those resentments now had fertile ground to grow. "So you're saying I should apologize publicly? Backtrack?" Sophia hesitated. "Maybe. Or paint Clarissa as manipulative. If you let her narrative stand uncontested, you'll lose. You need to fight back." The idea churned in Alexander's gut. His pride rebelled against apologizing, but he also feared the destructive potential of Clarissa's public image. "I'll speak with my PR team," he said curtly, ending the call. Within an hour, Alexander convened an emergency meeting with Bradley Swain and a team of crisis management experts. They sat around his long glass table, laptops open, phone lines buzzing. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley began, clearing his throat. "The interview has galvanized public support for Clarissa. She's being hailed as a role model for women standing up against infidelity. We need to refocus the narrative on your business achievements, your philanthropic efforts. Remind people who you are outside of this scandal." One of the crisis managers chimed in. "Alternatively, we can release a counter-statement accusing Miss S. Harrington of withholding the pregnancy from you, arguing she used it as leverage. That angle might shift some blame her way." Alexander scowled, recalling how Clarissa had tried to inform him, but was met with his own negligence. "That might be thin," he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. "But we can't just let her run away with this." Bradley hesitated, then spoke softly. "Alexander, maybe you need to consider a genuine apology. Public contrition could do wonders. A show of remorse. A vow to continue supporting Clarissa and the child financially, no matter what." Alexander's pride warred with the rational part of his mind. He loathed the thought of appearing weak. Apologies were for those who admitted they were wrong, and in his eyes, Clarissa bore some responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But the alternative, an all-out battle, might irreparably damage his empire. "Draft a statement," he finally conceded, tension visible in his clenched jaw. "Frame it as me regretting how events unfolded, reaffirm my commitment to the child, and mention I hope Clarissa and I can come to amicable terms." Bradley nodded, relief evident on his face. "We'll have it ready by morning." As the team filed out, Alexander remained in his chair, staring at the city lights. Amicable terms, he thought, recalling the legal documents accusing Clarissa of emotional instability. Those had been his lawyer's idea, but he hadn't protested. He knew it would likely anger her further. How did it all come to this? His mind drifted to memories of Clarissa, once bright, playful, engaging. Their early dates in Paris, spontaneous trips to the Caribbean, and dinners where they'd talk late into the night about their shared dreams. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment their relationship frayed. Perhaps it had been a series of small betrayals, neglected conversations, growing distances. Now, They stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps Clarissa wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her face during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. But the fleeting remorse clashed with anger. Her going public felt like an ambush, leaving him cornered. He pushed down whatever empathy he'd felt and resolved to win, no matter the cost. If Clarissa wanted war, he'd fight with every tool at his disposal. Days turned into another week. Clarissa's interview aired worldwide, generating impassioned debates. Donations to her charity soared, while Alexander's once gleaming reputation took blow after blow. Stockholders of Harrington Global expressed discomfort in private meetings, and rumors persisted that the board was exploring contingencies should Alexander's public image compromise the company's stability. Clarissa remained sequestered at the estate, focusing on her health and the charity event. Despite the hailstorm of sensational headlines, she found pockets of peace reading, journaling, painting. She even began designing a nursery, selecting soft pastel hues and whimsical animal murals, determined to provide a nurturing environment for her child. Alexander, however, escalated his counteroffensive. His lawyers filed motions claiming Clarissa had deliberately withheld news of her pregnancy to manipulate him. He declined a direct interview but released a video statement where he appeared remorseful yet subtly blamed marital discord on Clarissa's lack of supportive understanding of his business pressures. The statement earned mixed reactions. Some found it sincere, others labeled it damage control. Late one afternoon, Clarissa heard the echo of raised voices downstairs. She emerged from her room to see Winston arguing with a man in a tailored suit, one of Alexander's lawyers. Margaret Lee stood close by, her expression mirroring Winston's anger. "Clarissa, they've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, exasperation in her voice. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Clarissa stiffened. "Is Alexander here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." Clarissa accepted the paperwork, scanning the legal jargon that essentially questioned her entitlement to portions of the estate, claiming she abandoned the marriage. It also criticized her for public defamation, claiming that the interview painted Alexander in a damaging light. She felt her blood run cold. "That's enough," Winston growled, turning to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Lee." The lawyer bowed stiffly and departed. Clarissa closed the door behind him, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not letting up." Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." Later that evening, Clarissa locked herself in her bedroom. She gazed at the city skyline outside her window, tears finally overtaking her composure. The weight of the baby in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. Her child was counting on her to provide stability and security. Yet Alexander's relentless legal maneuvers threatened everything she was trying to build. In that moment, she made another life-changing decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years, an old family connection in England, who owned a country estate far from the paparazzi's reach. The phone rang, and a familiar voice answered. "Aunt Rosalind," Clarissa said, her voice trembling. "I need a place to stay, somewhere I can clear my head. Is your guest cottage still available?" Her aunt's warm reply was immediate. "Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish." Clarissa ended the call, a surge of relief coursing through her. If Alexander wanted to wage war, fine, but she wouldn't remain a sitting target. She would remove herself from the toxic environment, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on her child's well-being. The estate in England was secluded, nestled in lush countryside. the perfect retreat where she could gather her strength and prepare for the final battles to come. She spent the rest of the evening making arrangements, instructing Margaret on how to handle any urgent legal matters in her absence, coordinating with Winston to keep an eye on the estate, and packing essentials for the journey. A strange calm took hold of her as she placed each folded maternity garment into her suitcase. She was no longer passively reacting to Alexander's betrayals. She was charting her own course. At midnight, Clarissa stood by the nursery she'd only just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. "We'll come back," she whispered to the unborn child. "But for now, we need a safe haven." She left the nursery lights off, gently closing the door behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity for healing, and her willingness to protect what truly mattered. Regardless of Alexander's tactics, Clarissa was determined that neither she nor her child would live in the shadows of his ego and deception ever again. Clarissa's departure from New York was quiet, shrouded in secrecy to avoid the press. A private car whisked her to a discreet gate at the airport, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. The aircraft hummed gently as it rose above the city lights, each twinkle below her growing distant until the skyline was nothing more than a memory. The flight offered time for reflection. In the silent cocoon of the cabin, she flipped through photographs of her and Alexander from years past. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope, honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter and golden sunsets, snapshots of philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm. Each image felt like a relic from another era, proof that once they had shared something precious. Where did it all go wrong, she wondered, though the question no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward. Answers might never come, and that was acceptable. By dawn, the plane touched down on the fog-veiled runway of a private airfield in England. Waiting for her was Aunt Rosalind, a regal woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair. She enveloped Clarissa in a warm embrace the moment they met on the tarmac. "My darling girl," she murmured, "you've been through so much." Clarissa felt tears threaten to spill. "I need some time away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley that carried them through rolling hills, past grazing sheep and stone cottages. Eventually, they arrived at a sprawling countryside manor, Aunt Rosalind's ancestral home. Clarissa was shown to a quaint guest cottage with ivy climbing its walls, flower boxes brimming with lavender, and a little pond nestled behind it, surrounded by willow trees. It was a world apart from the opulence of the Harrington estate, yet just as enchanting in its own right. Over the next few days, Clarissa settled into a gentle routine, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoons sipping tea with Aunt Rosalind, and evenings reading by the fire. The relentless hammering of paparazzi and the digital storm of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret daily, learning that Alexander's legal team was livid about her disappearance, but there was little they could do. Legally, she was free to travel. Winston reported that the media had calmed somewhat, disappointed to find no further drama at the Harrington estate. One drizzly afternoon, as Clarissa lounged in a cushioned window seat, she felt a firm little kick inside her belly. She smiled, placing a hand over the spot. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. "Stronger than I ever was." In that moment, she realized how much she had changed in just a matter of weeks. No longer the hesitant wife striving to keep up appearances, she felt a quiet power blooming inside her, a determination to create a life of peace and integrity for her child. Occasionally, her mind drifted to Alexander. She'd wonder if he regretted his actions, if he missed her, or if he was merely strategizing his next business move. But those thoughts no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a sign of healing. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more fiercely than anything else. It was that love that propelled her onward. Aunt Rosalind's estate became a sanctuary for introspection, a place where Clarissa could nurture both her pregnancy and her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it, her resolve solidified like the ancient stones in the manor walls. She would finalize the divorce on her own terms, ensure her child's future was secure, and continue her philanthropic passion. If Alexander wanted to remain locked in his cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. Sitting by the pond one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in lilac and gold, Clarissa exhaled softly. The reflections of the willow trees rippled on the water's surface, reminding her of life's impermanence. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could shape what would come next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, heart lightened, ready to face the final notes of her confrontation with Alexander whenever that day would come. For now, she found solace in the hush of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence, and the life growing inside her both delicate and immensely strong. Outside a quiet English manor, beneath a sky of lavender and gold, Clarissa has finally found a sanctuary for herself and for the child she carries. Though her journey began in heartbreak and betrayal, it transformed into a testament of courage, self-discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Still, the world watches, waiting to see if Alexander Harrington will repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he fought so hard to build. In the meantime, Clarissa holds fast to her hopes for a future defined by love, integrity, and resilience. Will this billionaire's betrayal spark a revolution in Clarissa's life? Or will old wounds heal into a fragile truce?